Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another office hours with our customer success team here for VMware Cloud. We've got a few people in attendance. Zach's just going to kick something up. We're going to talk containerized permissions. Is that correct, Zach?
Correct.
Which is new as of M7P2-ish? P1? It was a patch after M7, but anyway, it's available now. And Zach will go into detail, also joined by Alicia, one of our CSMs who I've been working with. I had a chance to meet last week, and one of our newest members of our EMEA team, Fabio. So I don't know if you guys wanted to say
Hi,
hi.
Master. Hi, team. Hi, guys.
Welcome.
So as always, if you're going to join the Zoom, you are muted by default. And also, if you're on Twitch and watching, feel free to ask any questions on Zoom. Put it in the Q&A, and Twitch put it in the Twitch chat, or feel free to tweet at me at vcloudmatt. Does everybody else have Twitter? Zach, do you have a Twitter account?
I do.
Oh, okay.
I don't really use it much, but
Well, here's your chance to get some followers. What's
all
your,
right.
what's your Twitter account?
I don't know.
Oh, well, okay. That doesn't help.
I don't know, Matt. I mean, the VMC crowd, they're pretty wild and crazy. You might not want to turn them on Matt.
Well,
Turn them
yeah.
back.
Twitter is a safe place, right? Nothing bad happens on
All right. My
Twitter.
Twitter is at Zachary Zumbaugh.
Well, there you go. That's pretty straightforward.
Yep.
All
All
right,
right.
so Zach, are you ready to?
Share. I'm ready.
Awesome. Take it away.
Let me try to share my screen. There we go. Share. Share.
Excellent. We see it.
Hold on. Yeah, that's it. Okay. Share. Sorry. Okay. Here's the lab. So basically, what this containerized permissions allows you to do is allows you to use your integrate your Active Directory users and groups, which you could do before, but you could only assign to the cloud admin role, right? Um, so now you can add them. We'll go through. You can create your own roles within vCenter now that apply to the SDDC.
Yeah, and just to kind of clarify what Zach is saying there, he was correct that so before, and maybe we could look at the VMC side of it, but you could only use the built-in groups. You could assign users to the built-in groups, but you couldn't create your own role. You
Yeah,
had to use one of the predefined roles and then assign it. So the big part of this change is allowing people to create their own roles, of course, up to what is a cloud admin level. You can't give anything over and above that.
correct. So here I have a group. I created an Active Directory. Not really going to go into that. So and then it's integrated um, through here, identity sources. This is in the STDC vCenter. So we have our AD here. So then we can go to roles. So the one thing you want to keep in mind is cloud admin is the highest. So this has all the privileges that are valid in the VMC SDDC. Anything outside of this is not valid. And in my testing it, if you added something that wasn't under cloud admin, it wouldn't work. So the role would be kind of invalid. So what you want to do always when you're creating a new role, you always just want to copy the the cloud admin role because that will
So
give you the maximum base privileges that are allowed in the SDC.
yeah, so that's a really good advice there. Actually, this is important because that gets you what you have now. So some people might be asking, well, but hey, why would I want to do this if all I can get is cloud admin, right? So I think that there's a couple reasons. One, to get a little bit more granular and finite on some roles. And actually, oddly enough, I feel one of the biggest asks for this was just to be able to mirror the role names and permissions of on-prem. So it was something to add a little bit of congruity between both sides for people that are looking at things. So um, that's my experience anyway. I don't know if Zach, if
Yeah.
yours is the same.
Well, it's mainly to to limit people to certain functions. So when I clone that role, I created this ZZ. So you can I've been testing this. So I cloned it. So now it's an exact clone of Cloud Admin. So what you can do is uh, basically go through and limit the role. So this one has alarms. So we don't want them to have alarms. Auto deploy, cert management. We don't want them to have that. Yeah, so you can restrict based on the core cloud admin role. So data center privileges, none of that. So basically, you can go through and do that. So in this one, a role that I already created, I only have the ability to see um, virtual machine functions. So that's one thing that a lot of people. So people have like virtual machine admins. They don't want these admins to be able to do anything else in the SDC other than be able to access VMs and modify them, and not be able to like create resource pools or anything like that. So I have this ZZ test role. I think I actually applied it already to the vCenter. Let's see. So permissions. Yeah, so I applied. So the way to apply it is you just go there, corp.local, and it will search your AD, and you pick your role. So as we see, my ZZ test role is there. Propagate to children. So that'll just apply it to everything under the vCenter. So when you do create new clusters or resource pools within a cluster, it'll apply to those as well. I've already done this here. So
Now, also to clarify that a little bit, it doesn't give you access to the management resource pool still. So just
correct. The
everything else
management,
besides that, the management resource pool is still off limits for everybody.
yeah, the management resource pool is read only. So you can see the virtual machines, IPs. Will it even let you launch a console? Probably not. No, it doesn't even work. Okay, so I have that applied. So I need to log out. So I was logged in as cloud admin, so it gives me full access. So now I can log in as my Active Directory user, which was actually part of that group. Now I did not add that my user directly. So the group functionality works perfectly. So now I can see the VMs, like I said, here's my VM. I'll power it off just to show you. Complete shutdown. So now if I come over here and I go up, new resource pool, grayed out, add host, grayed out, new data store.
That's not going to work anyway, but it's interesting that you could click that. But
Yeah, it'll get to the end and then it will throw an error.
yeah.
Um,
Just another point
yes.
of clarification. So, and I apologize if we touched upon this, Zach, but so the AD integration is actually part of our hybrid linked mode, so that's not. It's used by containerized permissions, but you don't kind of get the AD login via that, which is kind of something a little bit separate.
I didn't think. Do we have? Oh, I
Yeah,
can't see
yeah,
anything.
you can't
Okay.
out of that, but yes, we have linked that
Yeah.
domain. So that's how you get the Active Directory users in, and then with the containerized permissions, then you can create roles and assign them. So it's
Yeah.
it's kind of two different, slightly different things, but yeah.
Yeah. See, I can't see anything in here. Well, a lot of stuff is blocked out. So yeah, that's basically it. I guess the main thing to reemphasize is only use the privileges from Cloud Admin, because otherwise you're not going to have a valid role. So just clone that role and then deselect privileges as needed for the role you want to create, and um, assign your AD groups to the resources and apply that role to them, and your users will be able to log in with their AD credentials.
Hey Zach, it's Alicia. I got a quick
Mhm.
question. So when the main user goes in to add users, they have the drop down and it has like three options. So you're saying, because I was kind of the understanding, I'd heard one time that, oh, there's we can do other things, and then somebody was like, no, we never tell the customers that. So is this just for us to go in and help customize? I mean, or would the actual admin be able to go and create these
Yeah,
unique
anyone with
different
the
roles?
Cloud Admin role can do this.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so this change was explicitly for customers to be able to go in and create. And like I said, a lot of times it wasn't necessarily granularity because a lot of the actual granularity existed in the predefined roles, but sometimes they wanted a slight tweak to it, or they wanted a different name for it, or just to match stuff for logging and all those kinds of things. So this is absolutely all stuff that is available to the customer. Where you saw the drop down was probably like the local OS, the which was in the users and groups there, or if you go to
Oh, yeah. When you go to add it, it has VMC local,
was that the
local.
drop down you were talking about, Alicia?
You know what? I feel silly. I was thinking of VMC.VMware, that where you add users over there.
Oh
This is
yes,
vCenter. My apologies.
yeah.
I
So
wasn't looking close enough. I
no, that's
thought
actually a
right.
really good thing to bring up, though. So there are multiple levels of identity authentication. So this is for your traditional users and stuff just to log into vCenter. So this is something that they can get into
Gotcha.
without hitting the portal whatsoever. They just need to be able to get to the vCenter, like Zach showed, that login page, and be able to authenticate to it. The
Gotcha.
cloud portal is separate because there's actually a lot more, um, I guess, lack of a better term, power in the cloud admin portal
Okay.
than there is here. So again, this is the traditional. Everybody's used to vCenter permissions. And Zach, maybe if you want to just go and show the identity there, um, this is more for like your infrastructure admins, right? This is for the people that are looking after all of your cloud services because yes, there's a lot of roles in here for sure you wouldn't want to give Zach group, right? Because in
Right.
here is where you can go in and this is where customers can add hosts, delete clusters, add clusters, all of those kinds of things. So there's, like I said, it's really good that you brought up because this is separate, part of the same service roundabout, but this is completely separate than letting kind of users log into. I would recommend, and Zach maybe you can add, or Fabio could add to this as well. Is that, like I said, the cloud admin portal is only for people that are going to be doing like infrastructure level activities and should be kind of your most trusted administrator kind of things. Whereas those containerized permissions we showed were more for your application guys to get in there or other
Okay.
teams just to manage their own VMs. Is that kind of correct, Zach?
Yeah, I mean, so what I was showing is only gives you access to vCenter. You can't manage the networking at all. that's done through this portal, and you have to have NSX Cloud admin to add networks and things like that.
So just to clarify a little bit on the networking part, I agree with what you said, but you can choose different networks for the virtual machine.
Correct. You couldn't create them or make any changes.
Yeah, you can't make can't make a segment or mess around with the VPN, which is actually the part of the NSX Cloud admin role is what gets you that. So
Yeah.
there is more granularity coming on this side as well. Um, so yeah, there is some points of confusion there definitely around what customers can't do. Like so, if you look at VMware Cloud on AWS and you hit the three roles selected there before you cancel or go back in.
Oh.
One of the roles we added relatively recently was probably one of the newest roles we've added into here. Is if you go to the VMware Cloud at AWS and then click on the three roles selected, is we added the administrator delete restricted.
Oh, okay.
So that was something that it was a direct customer ask that we just kind of rolled into the product, so that gives people the ability to come in and actually create stuff, just not delete stuff. So this is kind of the guys you kind of trust. So this is this is the role I'd give Zach. We'll put it that way. Like we'll you know he's kind of all right, but we don't want him to be able to delete anything. Now, what you have to be careful with here. Sorry, go ahead, Fabio.
No, I think that this is something useful because generally also my customer ask for a delete restriction on that, and looking to the vCenter, till now we didn't have something like that, just an administrator that is able to create everything, but without the possibility to delete something. It was something that my customer have asked several times, and now with the possibility to create several custom roles in vCenter, they are able to give to the executive level an access to the vCenter, because the executive would like to enter everywhere sometimes, but never give us the possibility to delete something, because it's just a few seconds to right click on the VM and delete from disk. And what I've done, what's happened? Okay, so probably I've done something wrong, but in the past was not so easy to give the access and give the proper access to all the levels. Now my customer look at this and say, okay, that's fine. I could create my custom role for my executive with a delete restriction role, so they're able to go everywhere. Maybe they could create something, it's fine. Now then we will maybe do a cleanup of that, but they are not able to do stupid thing, because sometimes it's just maybe they are not skilled on that, and it's something that is pretty useful, because customers like to do the same access level to the vCenter, maybe to the AWS console, and now they are able to do that. So I think that is something really great for our customer.
Yeah, I think it's good. So, and one very big point of clarification here is if you check both of those boxes, the delete restricted means nothing. So if you click administrator and administrator delete restricted, it takes the most permissive. So if you do want to have administrator delete restricted, you have to make sure you uncheck administrator and check delete restricted. It's actually
So over on the drop down where it has the three different roles, you're saying it will default to administrator unless a customer wants to change it to administrator
so there.
delete.
Yeah, so there's actually a couple. Again, there's also more things and more granularity here you can get into. So when you add the VMware Cloud on AWS, and actually we could probably remove your access and then add it back in, and they can see what it is if we wanted to. But it will come in with administrator. Absolutely. It will not come in with NSX, any of the NSX permissions. So when you click on assign a service role in VMware Cloud and AWS comes up, that's kind of the default role. So then usually what we do is most people add the NSX Cloud admin. The Cloud Auditor is not really necessary. Cloud admin and administrator, and then for other users you can pick administrator delete restricted. Now if you look up at the top left there, you'll see assign organizational roles of organization owner. There is a role of organizational user, which actually has slightly less abilities than um, yeah, if we could fix it afterwards, but if you just select it and don't save it. So this member will not be able to do any service role assignments or um, create users or any of those kinds of things. Now, that support user box is a very, very big checkbox as well. So if that box is not checked, that user cannot open a support ticket on this SDDC. And that's something that has bit us in the past with certain customers because they just went in and put a whole bunch of organization members in and didn't hit that support user. Somebody went to call in on the weekend for support, and because it wasn't checked, their account was not associated with it, and they're having issues. So that's
That's a
important to
good
remember.
tip. Thank you for
Yeah,
the heads up on
it,
that. Yeah.
that's a really big one to and I don't know why you wouldn't necessarily want to check that box. I don't know why, but we
Seems like it should be like defaulted checked. Like you said, like it's a support ticket. Like who cares if somebody puts in a support ticket?
yeah, I don't understand that necessarily. So maybe that's something we'll make the recommendation to change. Because yeah, it's just come up a few times with customers that are calling and or even trying to open up a chat on stuff like that. So it that's why I like to highlight. So again, we have these multiple layers of permission starting from coming in from the cloud console as a member or as an owner, all of the roles you see here underneath to all of the services which we're continuing to expand. Like I think there's one, oh, you do have Code Stream and Service Broker. Okay, so let's add that. So, and then kind of completely separate to that is all of the vCenter stuff that Zach was mentioning earlier. I apologize, Fabio. Was there something you wanted to say in there?
No, just about the check on the support because just it was yesterday that one of my customers asked me, I'm not able to open NSR. Why? I'm an administrator. That user is administrator, but why I'm not able to contact the support? They say that is not associated with anything. So that was the reason. And what's happening just yesterday to me with one of my customers. So I well know that checkbox that also on my side I've discovered that yesterday until we enabled the checkbox, that user was not able to file up NSR. So it's sometimes also the customer are not, they don't know that they must put that checkbox. So it's something that I hope that will change in the future because if someone is administrator of one SDC, it's normal that is able also to open NSR, but actually no way if it's not organization owner also. That I discovered that if one is organization owner, they are able because by default is they are able to do that
Yeah, you can't even
only if
uncheck it on an organizational owner. So,
yeah,
um,
yeah,
That's
you don't have yeah, but several customers got maybe only user that are able to access and they don't got for sure organization owner privilege and it's tricky because if the customer don't remember to put the checkbox will be crazy and you discover that only in the worst moment in the when they just need to open the
yeah,
NSR.
this is an interesting question that I'll put out there to the team on the call and for people to comment on, either on Twitch or YouTube afterwards. I'm just trying to, again, like I mentioned earlier, just I'm struggling to come up with what users that you give access to this that you would not want to be able to open a support ticket.
if you had like a team of a somewhat large team and you had like a team lead and you only wanted like a few people to be able to open tickets as opposed to, eventually once, people get huge environments, they want to maybe potentially vet the ticket process. Maybe they have an internal process to track and open tickets on the VMware side, and they don't want everyone, all the admins or operational people, to be able to do that. Would be my thought.
So totally agree to you, but sometimes looking to the big customer, they got maybe several users that are able to access to the My VMware with just a support role. So they figure out that if they've already created a user into the My VMware, they don't think that they must also add the permission on the cloud level. So I got also another customer that's asking, but I got the permission on My VMware. We got several users with the support user role, so they are not able to do anything else. But when we try to open an SR and we choose the VMware Cloud, they say that we must open into the VMware Cloud console. So there is a little bit confusion when the customer start to use our solution until they need to file up an SR. there is some confusion because several times they didn't know where they needed to open an SR. So I think that maybe we must work on that and create several documents to just tell to our customer that working with the cloud is just a little bit different. Also looking to the SR opening perspective.
Yeah, I guess that's a valid point. I guess if they have an organization that wants to track it on their end a little better, I guess I'm more of a fan of when you have a problem being able to get support quickly. But everybody has their own processes and procedures, so that's good. So yeah, so now there is also another level of kind of authentication beyond this, which is our VIDM integration, which um, allows for two-factor authentication into the cloud portal, not available currently for vCenter as of right now. Um, but that is a different conversation we covered not last week before on our APJ call, which is a video up on YouTube about how to configure that and what that kind of brings to the table. So, it is very good to highlight all these different levels of where people come in, what the permissions are. As you saw in that list, you can give people access to just, if you want to click on just the console there so they can see all the services. Um, so you could give people just access to network insights. So your network team just needs that, or your monitoring team just needs log intelligence. So all of these can be granularly broken out so that they won't actually even see the other ones and be able to log into them. So we're definitely continuing to work and we're continuing to add more and more services to this portal as well, which really makes things quite a bit easier and more granular. So any other questions around that? Nope. All right. So if you go back to the vCenter, uh, Zach, and I know I've harped on this several times, but you can actually see we've done it to ourselves here as well. Is that another part of the change for containerized permissions is the ability to put machines outside of the compute resource pool, which you can see right there. So in general, this is a very, very bad idea. Um, and I'll get on my soapbox here that when you have resource pools, you're kind of either all in or all out. So, if this cluster was to hit contention, now we have reservations around our management resource pools, so those ones will be relatively okay, or those ones will be okay. Now, what will happen is that one we have here, Aiden, another member of our team, esteemed member in the UK, um, created this virtual machine outside the resource pool. So if contention came, that virtual machine he created would have more resources assigned to it than all of the virtual machines in the resource pool. And that goes into the share values. So you can see there's 4,000 shares currently for CPU for that resource pool. So that 4,000 shares is shared by each VM in the resource pool. So if we go on to click on Aiden's virtual machine, and if you go to should be under the VM. Yeah, if you expand down the CPU there, it'll just tell you on the right side there. He's got 2,000 shares just by himself. So if there's more than two machines in the compute resource pool, they're not going to get as much access to CPU as this virtual machine. Now, the other nice thing is this is very, very easy to fix. And Zach, do you want to demonstrate how you fix that? And just like that, it's fixed. Right? It's just a drag and drop operation. Doesn't affect the VM really in any way, but it just now puts it on equal standing as everything else. Now, if you want to break out multiple levels of uh, resource priority amongst your virtual machines, my recommendation, and I'll bounce it off Fabio and Zach, but my recommendation is then to create resource pools underneath the compute resource pool and ensure there's no VMs outside of those either. So you're kind of all in or all out for resource pools is generally the best practice. Agree?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I know I've seen it a lot because I've been in support and PSO, and people tend to just use them as folders without realizing the consequences of the how they can actually limit performance potentially. Here, obviously, we do it to uh, the management resource pool has to have a lot of reservations just because that's running the infrastructure. Um, but here you can kind of play with it. But yeah, definitely, as we saw, if you create something outside, it's going to get 50% of the shares of the entire default compute pool. So um, keeping in nesting the resource pools, I think, as well is a good idea because you're kind of peeling off, you're taking portion of the overall compute capacity that you're given.
Yeah, the only time I've actually seen, and it's been very very rare. I think I've maybe seen this a couple times of resource pools implemented well. Actually had Power CLI scripts running daily to modify the share values because adding VMs again, like I said, outside of the resource pool will skew all the share values. Putting some in, putting sub resource pools. So I've seen a couple of guys that actually did a lot of really good coding around doing an analysis of, if anything has new had been added, what the average share value was, and actually going in and modifying it on our virtual machine. But that is a degree of overhead and potentially prone to breakage. So just use the compute resource pool. Everybody will be happy. It's a much much safer way. Um, and in fact, that we prefer the people not modify the exact share values, but give high priorities or lower priorities in the subpools. Like I said, even if you were to create a resource pool here under that compute resource pool, you'd now have the same problem of everything inside that resource pool versus everything outside that resource pool would not necessarily be equal in share value. So that's something to very much consider, and resource pools get to be a nightmare very very quickly. It's That's why, yes, and like I've seen the same thing you have, Zach, where guys used it as just kind of organizational folders. If you want to organize your VMs, and I understand that sometimes this screen can look a little, busy, but we have that nice VMs and folders view, which is just one over. If you want to organize your virtual machines, this is where you do it. And you can see we're not doing it, but so, um,
Some people are.
but but the thing is, this screen here is more where you would do the containerized permission stuff that Zach showed earlier, right? So if he expands down the workloads folder there, and I think he created a folder in there, say we just wanted to give that group access to the boom folder, this is where you would do it. You would make sure that all those virtual machines were in that folder, and that would be where you gave those. This is where you give those very granular levels of virtual machine access here. Don't create resource pools to do it there. Do it here. That's this is the intended implementation of this page and of all permissions is to use it in the VMs and folders view. And you can create as many folders as you want here. You can go 12 deep if you want to. It doesn't affect performance at all. So do all of the breaking up of your workloads into logical order here and assign the permissions here. Unless, what Zach demonstrated earlier, just want to give somebody access to everything, then of course you could do it you could still do it here, just at the root level of the vCenter. Um, but yeah, don't do it on the host and clusters view. And I know that it's been something that's been around for forever, that people just kind of default to looking to that view as opposed to this view, which is kind of an interesting thing. Um, but this is more where you're intended to do all of your permissions. And
Yeah, for sure. Especially for VM, as you can see, you have the exact same permissions window These are just all the inherited. Because like, remember, I applied my group permission role to the vCenter, so it propagated down to everything, which includes all the folders beneath it as
Yeah,
well.
and it's actually handy. You can see there where it was defined in or where it came from. So here it's a global permission. So you know it's at the root level. Because sometimes if you have multiple sub levels, we can get a little bit confusing as to where the role is actually assigned. You can view it in here. But yeah, so if we wanted to just give Zack group access to Boom, we would go back to the root level, remove him from the global level, come in here and add him at this folder, and then when he logged in, all he would be able to see is the VMs in the Boom folder when he went to this screen, and that's all he'd be able to interact with. So that's definitely what this is definitely the recommended way of doing things, especially more than creating resource pools. I can't kind of emphasize this enough. Just don't create resource pools unless you have a really, really, really good reason to, because they get really complicated really, really fast. And unfortunately, by default now, if you just go in, so if you go to create a virtual machine here, Zach, at the root level, um, I just want to
Mirror.
demonstrate that now by default it'll actually place them outside of the, which is why probably Aiden had this happen to him. So if you go up to just kind of the cluster one or whatever, yeah, it's not gonna let you do it there. So click on cluster one and do new virtual machine. Just kind of whatever through it. So you can actually see here, it's picking the data center level, right? Whereas before, this would have thrown you an error if you click next. Actually, it's the next screen, I think. Yeah, it's the next one. Yeah. So this one before, if you expand down cluster one, before you had to pick the compute resource pool or it would give you an error. Now you can just pick cluster one, and that's the default. So if you're not paying attention when you're deploying these workloads, you're going to put them outside of the resource pool. So that's also something very much to be aware of, because before it used to default to the compute resource pool. So if you're just used to kind of creating a virtual machine and going next, 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 finish, you're now going to create it outside the resource pool as opposed to in the resource pool, which is, you know, the way it should be. So that's definitely something to be aware of. And you can see the test one is now outside, and that's just kind of the default, which I'm working on actually getting changed, so that we can put back to the old behavior of putting everything into the compute resource pool by default. So anyway, that's my resource pool, and this is actually one of the things that I fought pretty hard on, is actually not allowing customers to do this, but I lost that battle. So unfortunately, um, but yeah, so that's my soapbox. Anybody else have a soapbox they want to get on? I'll take that as a no.
Nope, that's all I had for this week.
No, that was good. I appreciate that, Zach. I think that was really good. That was informative. It definitely went over how easy it is now to create roles. It's just like vCenter now. It is vCenter. I understand how that sounds, but it's just like it was be on your on-prem. You just like, and that was really good advice, and something I think that we should emphasize is just pick the cloud admin role, clone it, and then kind of deselect the stuff that you don't want. Um, to know, to give greater access, or you may want to start at the bottom and then just create stuff. But at least that gives you a framework for what is available, which I think is a handy advice. And then we talked about how you can assign this at the root level, on folder levels, all those kinds of things. And then we also talked about how this is separate than the console authentication. So I covered a lot of really good things there today, I think, and which is great because I came in with not much going on, so I think that was much appreciated, Zach. Um, and Fabio,
Thanks,
thank you for your
thanks,
opinion.
Zach.
And Alicia, is there any other questions you have for anything completely differently, or?
You know, I have one for you offline. just about like the different roles between PSO and CSA and solutions engineers and things like that. So if you have a minute after this, if we can connect, that'd be awesome.
Actually, we can cover that right now because that's a fairly public information. It is a point of confusion, both a little bit internally and for our customers. So, PSO that one's fairly easy. That is our post-sales consulting organization. So that is for essentially any work the customer doesn't want to do themselves. So if they want to buy VMC, but they don't want to do the configuration for site recovery, or they want some help with HCX, or they want help with setting up VPNs, PSO was kind of our professional services arm that they can contract in. And PSO, and you can take PSO and partner fairly interchangeably in this discussion.
Oh
And
yeah. I meant to add that one too.
yeah,
There's so many different roles. So that could be arranged either through VMware directly or through a partner.
absolutely, either or, and there is a partner certification program to be VMC ready, I believe. So there are partner certifications. So if you are looking to hiring a partner, make sure that they have that accreditation for it. So that's kind of PSO is to do a lot of the billable work for customers. Usually on site, could be remote, but so that's the PSO arm. Now our SE team, our sales engineers, are the kind of polar opposite. They're the pre-sales guys that help with the customers with defining use cases, working initially on some of the architectures and some of the functionality with customers, and working with the account teams for pricing and all of those kinds of things to get the
Sorry
initial
for the
deal done.
background noise, by the way.
Yeah.
We're kind of full office here in Atlanta right now because we had a fire. So
Oh, that's
for
not
the
good.
background noise.
So yeah, that's kind of the sales role, and then customer success kind of it fits in the middle, and this has always been a very big point of, where does customer success fill in? So we kind of come in the pre-sales stage to, and some cases help the set team or sales engineering technologist specialist engineering team. Yeah. Um, so we'll help them at the later stages of the sales process to kind of work on the architecture and for this customer success architects. That would be the bigger customers, and then CSMs will have a little bit more of the other ones. The CSMs, that's also when a CSM, a customer success manager, will get assigned, is when the deal is in a certain stage in our booking process to smooth the transition from the customer buying to the customer onboarding.
Gotcha.
And then we work with the customer through that onboarding, through getting and consuming and potentially expanding onto the platform. And then kind of where PSO comes in on that other side is when, again, customer success is not a hands-on keyboard organization. So if we can advise customers on how to configure a VPN or HCX, we can talk them through it, but we will never actually configure those things for them because we're a free
Right.
resource.
Okay.
So we
I like
advise.
that saying advise but not keyboard. That makes it really
Yeah.
understandable.
So
So thank you.
yeah. So the second they say, but I actually want somebody to do this for me, it's like, well, okay, here's somebody you can talk to for PSO or a partner organization. So that's kind of how this thing works. And I'm glad you asked that because, like I said, that is a very large source of confusion out there for where all of these teams kind of fit in. So.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. And also solutions engineers, they can also like Hendra. He helps run like the POCs and some of the
Yeah.
trials and whatnot.
So
Right.
POCs are traditionally run by the set team. Pilots are usually run by us. So to explain the difference between that, a POC is free resources that VMware is giving to select customers to trial the product before they buy. So obviously we don't have a lot of resources to give away for free, so that's kind of a very select amount of customers. We do have the Accelerate program as well, which is something people can apply for. That is also a longer POC funded by VMware that is again mostly run by the set organization for use case definition and validation. And then there's pilot, which means the customer is actually paying for the resources, but on a shorter term. And in some cases, there's some deals thrown in there. But it is something that the customer is wholly paying for to essentially vet out whether or not their use case is going to work, and that's where we get more involved. Now, there is also a really nice thing about the difference between POC and pilot, besides the free and users. Is when a POC ends, that's it. That SDC goes away, so all of the work you had ever done on that disappears. For a pilot, on successful completion of the pilot, you can just keep paying for it, and all that work you've done now remains.
And you could just go ahead and buy a subscription or
Yeah,
reserved instance and then roll, like, say, an on-demand paid pilot into a, like you said, just keep all your SDDC, your hosts, but then just change the way that you're paying for them to make it a little more
yeah,
palatable to the
absolutely. And
okay.
there are some differences there with, so especially so there are some configs you can pull out from VMware Cloud, but the issue is when you remove an SDDC, actually not most, all of the public IP addresses would change. So any of the firewall rules and all of those routing things you had done will need to be redone. Now, like I said, you can export a config and go in and manually modify the config. And I think there's a few teams working on some tools. I know we were working on one for a while. We kind of had one kind of half working for being able to pull a config and then just being able to replace where the public IP addresses go. But that's why, and it's not just to make money, but that's why we try to, put position customers more to the pilot phase, because we're going to work very hard to make them successful, and when they are, it's a
Yeah.
lot easier to just continue on. So
So if, like, the solutions engineer, like a Hendra, he's going to be working on like the POCs and the set accelerate type ones, but if it goes to the paid pilot, then that's where they would engage. You said, is it PSO at that point
no,
or?
so that's us. So
Okay,
a paid pilot for us is really not much different than a paying customer,
right.
right? It's the only difference maybe is that they may come in smaller with a bigger deal size. We may apply more resources to it than say your regular three host customer.
Right.
Obviously,
Okay, that makes sense. So yeah, so that's like a lot of the customers I have right now have 3 hosts going, but they're really big upside, so that's why they
yeah.
have
So if there's a bigger
this.
deal and
Okay.
more looking at it in the future, that's where we'll get involved. If it's a smaller customer, they still, not to say that smaller customers get ignored. They just do not get assigned to CSA by default. Um, it's some degrees of CSM coverage and stuff like that. Chat's always available to them, those kinds of things. So we'll help them out, where we
Gotcha.
can,
Okay.
but they don't quite get the allocation that, of course, obviously somebody that's going to buy
Right.
50, 100 hosts. So
Right. So the PSO is, like you said, kind of more for like when a customer just could do something, they have the capabilities, it doesn't require,
well,
a huge level of design potentially, but they just maybe don't have the
so
internal
So to,
resources.
to, to clarify that a little bit too, so yes, that's one scenario. The other scenario is they don't have those resources. So
Right.
they may be a development shop that doesn't have a lot of networking expertise per se.
Right. Okay.
So
Gotcha.
there may be gaps in their knowledge, or setting up site recovery, and where we see a lot of PSO coming in now is for migrations. Setting up HCX again, we can advise, and setting up the pieces of HCX, which we're going to cover again here shortly in one of the webinars coming up, but we do have on YouTube as well. Setting up those pieces is relatively easy. Actually, I'd say it's easy. Doing migrations is hard, because you really have to do an analysis of what applications are running in your environment, break them into segments that are going to migrate, and all of those kinds of things gets really difficult. The technical part's easy. Once you have all those groups, you just click a few mouse buttons and things move. But defining those groups can be incredibly difficult depending on the size and complexity of the organization. And
Gotcha.
PSO has been, has, and lots of partners as well, have a long history of migrating customers from either a data center to another data center, or one platform to another, whatever. So that is where we see a great majority of PSO and partner work now, is to assist in breaking up those migrations, not necessarily just the nitty gritty stuff. Like as you said, we try to make that as easy as possible to set up a VPN connection, or set up HCX or whatever have you. But it's all of the procedural stuff that gets really, really, really hard.
All right. So now to throw another kink in, how does the TAM fit into all of this?
Yeah, TAM is kind of separate to
I
all of
think
those
that I could help
conversations.
on that because till the last week I was at M, so I think that
Oh, there you go. Fabio
we
can
could
explain
say
this then.
something
Okay,
about that.
good. I'm on the call with the right guys, obviously.
Yeah. Well, actually, the TEM it depends because if we look to the US TEM are a little bit different from the EMEA TEM because looking to the US, the TEM are more trusted advisory, so they are doing more an advisory than doing stuff on the field. So there is some little bit differences. This is my perception. Also talking with other guys in the US. So if you talk with people from the US, generally the TEM help the customer just to find the use cases, just to find how to move to the cloud, and maybe help the SE during the initial stages where they need to create the deal. So where they just start to take all the data and write it and design something to sell to the customer. So the TEMs start to work on that stages, but generally don't help so much during the adoption. So if you ask to them in the US just to help create the VPN or maybe to create to help during the adoption, it's not their role. So there is some differences on that. But generally, the TAM is the trusted advisor for the customer everywhere. So you are the people working with the customer, closely with the customer, and you help as a TAM the customer just to make the right choice, also looking to the VMC solution, just to look what you have to move, looking to the right strategy, also about the migration. So something that could migrate using HCX, or maybe you need to find out a different strategies. So this is because the TEM is the people that generally works for a lot of years with the same customer. So you know everyone in the customer, you know all the applications, so is able to drive sometimes the adoption and help us SES team. So when I was at them, I worked with Aidan and Prasanna with several customers just to drive the adoption and to find out what could go wrong because it's fine if everything works properly. But as a time, you know all the application that maybe will be difficult to move or will be really hard because there are a lot of dependencies. They need some network strange stuff and all these things. Looking to the European terms, here in Europe, we work more on the field with the customers. So we generally help also during the adoption to configure maybe the VPN, to check all the network stuff, and also to find out all the people that must be engaged into the customer to have all the stuff properly configured. So maybe you know all the stakeholder on the network and security, all the stakeholder on the network, on the operation. So you are the person that know everyone into the customer. So you are part of the PSO, but you are the right person into the customer side that could find everyone and maybe got the knowledge of all the application and infrastructure. So it's just a jolly for us also when we got a TEM into our customer.
So that was really good, Fabio. And just to kind of frame that a little bit for you, Alicia, is TAM is assigned to a customer. It's completely kind of unrelated to VMC. Um,
Right,
it,
because the TAM would be the
Yeah,
advisor for like the full body of
yes, and
VMware
some
products.
TAMs are dedicated to specific customers. Some share amongst it. There's a whole varying tiers
But they
of
have to know like every
yes,
single
they are the
yeah,
technical
requirement.
account manager for that account. So
Okay.
that's why I said they're kind of a little bit separate. They're not like off to the side. They're involved in all of this stuff, obviously, but they're not there because of the VMC deal. They're there
no,
to
they are
assist the
working with
customer.
every product of VMware. So they work with
Okay.
VMC if a customer got VMC, but they work with people from VRA for the automation part from all our products. So the TEM must know all the VMware products. So a lot of things
Okay.
to know.
And that's why I'm not a TAM.
And that's why I moved it out from the TEM. Too many stuff to do with the TEM. So
No,
Right.
our TAM teams are fantastic. I know
yeah,
quite a lot of the TAMs, and you know they very good. Like I said, they're usually very close to the customers, and that's why we leverage them a lot as well when we're working with the customers because they can give us usually some very in depth understanding of where the customer is on a maturity side or technical side, all those kinds of things. They're an absolute great resource for us to leverage to assist the customer going forward as well. So
Yeah, when I joined, I think they said that they currently sell 51 different products or something like that. So that would be a lot for them to know for sure.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Uh, so anyway, so I guess with that, we're about time here. I appreciate Alicia. I think I love the participation. I love the questions. Hopefully, we helped out.
It was great. Thank you.
Fabio, thank you very much for your input. Zach, again, thank you for running
Well,
and with the containerized position. So we had a nice topic. I will actually be again running a webinar potentially tonight for the APJ time on Horizon on VMC. That'll be at 7 p.m. PST, or I guess it's PDT now. So that'd be tonight, depending on how many signups we have. We'll be back here again next week. I apologize for missing last week. We actually had an offsite where most of the team got to meet each other. I got to spend time with one of my other esteemed colleagues locked in a room on an escalation. Um, but I did have the opportunity to see everybody afterwards, which I guess is probably in some cases more important. And I look forward to potentially meeting everybody again, and maybe meeting Fabio if, depending on how VMworld EMEA stuff goes. Um, so I apologize. Last week we didn't have any of the stuff, but going forward we should be here again Tuesday mornings for America EMEA. I guess it's afternoon in EMEA, and APJ at 7 o'clock Pacific time, which I believe is noon in Sydney. And like I said, we'll be running a webinar tonight, and then in the 2 more weeks we'll be doing. I'll be doing actually another webinar, and that one you probably people want to watch. Is that's going to be kind of a preview of stuff going to be coming at VMworld. There's a lot of stuff coming at VMworld here this year, as with all years. We talked about this in one of our office hours, I think a couple weeks ago. About I used to be able to make the majority of the sessions at VMworld like 10 years ago. Now there is so much going on. It's very easy to kind of get lost in the mix, which is why then after VMworld we'll be running another session to recap all of the stuff at VMworld that people may have missed, because it's, I invariably miss a lot of stuff as well, but we'll be covering that for our customers. And then actually we're going to be doing right in line with what Alicia is talking about with we're going to have some members of our PSO team coming in and explaining their roles and the services that they offer and how customer success and PSO works together. So Alicia, you might want to tune into that. That's probably going to be about a month and a half out. So we continue to have more and more content out there. We do put up the webinars at least. I might put this one up to YouTube as well for content, so you can always watch it afterwards if there's something you wanted to look at. And you can always tweet at me at vcloudmatt or at Zack Zumbaugh if he logs into it, or email us at cloudcs@vmware.com. Or drop a comment on YouTube or on Twitch, and we do our best to make sure that we get back to everybody, and that's includes suggesting ideas for us to, for what to do in the future. We're always very open to talk about anything, or just come in, like happened today, and just start asking some questions, and we'll do our best to answer them. So again, thank you very much for the help I had in from our teams, and thank you for everybody that was watching. And everyone have a great day.
Thanks.
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 Bye.
Bye.